Hi, Carrie.
Hi, Josh.
How are you today?
I'm busy.
Where am I supposed to be looking?
How are you? You can look
Y'all
anywhere.
Are like looking I can look at each other.
I like how
I'm
Rebel's just like completely interrupting the intro.
I know.
Oh, is that what we're doing?
Yeah,
Oh, it's okay.
it's okay.
It's
It's not
all right,
really
Rebel.
a formal intro.
Put the camera on Rebel. Let's show her face right now.
Yeah, she's so happy.
So excited.
It is good to have you here.
Yeah.
And we're going to do another one soon too. So we're this episode
Yeah.
for everybody that's listening is going to be we're going to talk about disordered eating, not to be mistaken for eating disorders, and that's one of the things we're going to talk about. And it's National Eating Disorder Awareness Week this week too. So don't go anywhere. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Therapist Take, and we're going to talk about disordered eating today. We have, a special guest
Please.
here. Sorry, Carrie, you are also here.
I am here.
With me doing this. A very special friend, colleague, co-owner of a business partner, Rebel Buersmeyer. And the reason we have Rebel today is because she's always had a special interest and a heart for helping people who battle eating disorders. And not only is she a licensed therapist and has a plethora of certifications, one of the things that she specializes in is eating disorder treatment. And you're currently the president of the Oklahoma Eating Disorder Association.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
Right. And so we encourage everybody to check out their website. We'll make sure we put a lot of resources in the description of this video ultimately, or if you're listening to this on the podcast, we'll put them in the show notes. Yeah. And so it's good to have you here.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. And like I said, we're going to, you also do a lot of stuff with first responders. And so we'll definitely have to have you back to do an episode on that.
Absolutely.
Too.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll wrangle her for 2 episodes.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. So, what a lot of people might not know is, unlike Carrie and I, who love the spotlight, because I know Carrie loves being on camera.
It's a dream.
Rebel desires it less, I would say, and but she has been one of our partners for 15 years.
Day
now.
one, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we've all been in this
15?
together since
Is
the
it
beginning.
15?
Yeah. So everybody may figure out why I don't like to be on the podcast today.
You always do so well, though. Every
I
time
know.
you've been on like one of the YouTube videos or something that we've done, like you don't seem nervous. Yeah,
Thanks.
yeah.
Fake it till you
At
make
least
it.
during the
I
filming.
mean, sometimes I'm in dorsal vagal states.
Therapist joke.
I'm frozen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Eventually, we'll have to do that guided imagery
Yes.
podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. We got plans.
You don't have to be videoed for that one.
Yes.
Live. You want to do it live? Guided imagery live?
No.
That sounds like a good one.
No, because I got to have music in the background.
Yeah. That's true.
Yeah.
Well, so it's a National Eating Disorder Awareness Week. These awareness weeks that have so many words attached to them, like
Yeah.
I feel like I'm going to switch words, flip-flop things.
Leave one out.
I know.
Yeah.
But I do see that you're wearing your purple for National Eating
Yeah.
Disorder Awareness Week.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
why I put that on this.
That's right.
Yeah, I did, and I also, if Hannah, go ahead, put Rebel's little card up that has her name on it. I put your name in purple for that reason too.
Very good.
Yeah, because I know.
It's
Yeah.
the signature color.
That's right.
It
Right.
is.
So we have this concept of disordered eating. I don't know if I'm sure the mental health community that has been around for a minute is going to know what that is, and people who are partaking in eating disorder recovery or disordered eating recovery would probably know the difference, but I don't know if the general population would know the difference if they heard somebody say disordered eating. I'm wondering if they just might think eating disorder. So what is it? What is eating, disordered eating?
Really, I mean, there are so many similarities between disordered eating and eating disorders. The primary difference is the severity of the issues that they are experiencing.
Okay.
So the severity of it and how frequent they are engaging in those types of behaviors
Okay.
really is what makes the difference between disordered eating and eating disorders.
Okay.
Right. So is it? Is it? It's not in the DSM, right? Like the diagnostic
It is not.
manual.
No.
Okay. So is it like a? Would you say it's kind of a lower tiered? Like, are we as concerned about people's safety when it comes to disordered eating as much as we would be like with certain eating disorders?
I don't know that we are as concerned as those with eating disorders, but they can still be harmful. Absolutely. They can still lead to physical and mental issues, and they can absolutely lead to eating disorders.
Right. Okay.
I guess as you say that, it makes me think about anxiety. Right. A lot of people identify, oh, yeah, I experience anxiety symptoms, right? Intrusive thoughts, elevated heart rate, kind of that dread and worry, but they may not meet the diagnostic criteria for generalized anxiety disorder.
Right.
And maybe that's, I don't know if that's a, helpful parallel, but because you can have some anxiety and it grow into, develop, increase into meeting criteria for generalized anxiety disorder, right?
Right. So
Okay.
eating disorders have, yes, kind of along that same lines, diagnostic criteria that
Okay.
they have to meet, where with disordered eating, they are not meeting the full criteria, but they can definitely be experiencing some of the symptoms on the criteria
Sure.
list. Yeah.
And I would think, too, that especially given our perspective as relational therapists, that I would imagine any level of disordered eating all the way up to the high end maybe of eating disorders is going to impact your relationships, your functioning, right?
Right.
Depending upon how much time, energy, this is taking up in your life.
Right. And that goes from either thinking about food and thinking about exercise, all the way up to going and buying food and putting in several hours of exercising. So, yeah.
Yeah. So, and of course, this is meant to be a discussion and not a, where we came prepared with a bunch of statistics or anything like that. But I would imagine that disordered eating probably would affect more people, I would imagine, right? It's kind of it covers a broader range of things.
Right.
Okay. Just would make sure we have.
Yeah.
Because so here's my thought on it. Okay, is that who doesn't?
I was thinking that
Have
same thing.
disordered
Do we
eating.
just say it that
Right.
bluntly?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean,
Right?
I think about like trauma blocking, which is a form what we would call a trauma response, where you access the reward centers of your brain to get a dopamine hit, so that you can basically create a numbing effect, And so a common way people trauma block, a common example that might come into your mind is if you can think back into the 80s when your dad is sitting on the couch watching TV, flipping channels. Well, there's nothing on TV, but you just keep flipping, right? Because it's like it's like trying to create a dopamine hit on that. And but I'm like, when it comes to it, we have a term for it, like vegging out. Which as a kid I used to think meant eating vegetables in front of the TV, right? And I'm like, oh, it's becoming a vegetable.
Yeah.
I get it now. And so
Yeah. Laying like vegetables.
right, but I'm like, who doesn't trauma block? At least at times.
Yeah, of course.
And so that's kind of what I was thinking about when I was thinking about disordered eating. I'm like, does anybody is there a poster child of someone who isn't a disordered eater?
So I think that, if we're saying disordered, that probably tends to more of those who experience patterns
That's a good
of
way.
their disordered eating, where, yeah, I mean, we all are going to eat too much at a time, or we're all going to skip a meal
Right.
for one reason or another. Or, yeah.
Yeah, so it's not an isolated event, or not even like, but I would even say, like, what if your pattern is spread out over, like, there's big gaps in, like, every, like, once ever blue moon, so to speak, I tend to overdo it a little bit. I mean, that, I guess that might fall under the umbrella. There might be some alarm there, but if you're pretty much staying on track with and being mindful of how you're managing your food intake,
Yeah.
then
And I think that, eating a little bit too much because I'm enjoying a meal and I'm conversing and not being, aware of myself and my stomach at that moment, I think is different than I'm going and I'm eating because I'm stressed out.
Right.
I'm stress eating. I'm emotional eating. I'm not eating because I don't have an appetite because I'm so stressed out. So I think that there's a little bit of a difference and distinction there as well.
yeah,
I think that's true.
I agree.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about just some of the differences and maybe even similarities in eating disorders. So with the two most common eating disorders people think of are anorexia and bulimia, but there's also binge eating, right? Is there any
Binge
more?
eating is actually the most common eating disorder that is being diagnosed. But yes, I think anorexia and bulimia are the two that most people are aware of.
Right. So would you also say that you can be a disordered eater and not have an eating disorder, but people with eating disorders are also disordered eaters?
Right,
Is that
right. They have disordered eating behaviors.
Right, okay.
Yes.
Okay.
right? Because I noticed, like, and I created a couple graphics that we can put up of some examples of disordered eating, and I was just reading through those as I was kind of putting it together, obviously, because I was putting it together, so I had to read through it. But I just noticed that there was, like, a lot of it looked like symptoms of eating disorders too. Like, just there's binge eating, there's compensatory behavior is one of them, where you try to compensate and then expel, whether it's through exercise or laxatives or diuretics of some sort, but when does it become an eating disorder, I guess, is the question.
Well, so I want to go back just for a second and just kind of reiterate that both disordered eating and eating disorders are maladaptive coping mechanisms.
Okay.
Okay.
For one thing or another. So when does it become an eating disorder? It depends on which of the eating disorders we're talking about, but there's a frequency to the amount of times that we're binging and purging in a week, or a frequency to how often we're binging. So the frequency and then also the severity really kind of show the distinction between the two for the most part.
Yeah. And I would think too, again, how much it's interfering in your life.
Yes.
Right? As another kind of indicator. Like if you're disordered eating, but you can keep up with your relationships and your jobs and your school, and you can sleep and you can, that's your level of functioning is going to be, much less of a struggle than people who are not able to work or can't keep relationships or.
Right. And with disordered eating, it's more subtle too.
Sure.
So, it's not, people aren't going to see it quite as often.
Sure.
Or they're not going to notice the
symptoms. Yeah. Right. So eating disorders are going to be a little bit harder to hide.
Yes.
Because they're going to be more intense, more frequent, and probably causing more of a problem.
Yes. Physically, relationally, mentally.
Daily life. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So, do you ever wonder, like, why our brains do that? when it comes, like, if you really think about it, like food, like really, like the other day I was, went and got some food probably. I went and got fast food. So I was hungry. So I needed to eat. It's just, always feel guilty after getting fast food when you do it, especially when you do it regularly. But I'm sitting there and I'm eating this food, right? And I'm going, and I'm like, it only feels good going down. Like, which of course they have that expression, right? It feels good going down. And I'm like, why? Like, why do we get hooked on this stuff? Like, you know, why does it have to feel so good? The other day, I was telling you that story, Carrie, about my son. I discovered that if you take a little, like, cold hot fudge, like in a jar that's in, you take some cold hot fudge and you put it on a sugar cookie. I don't like sugar cookies, but I like those sugar cookies. And I discovered this the other day, and I just was like, oh my goodness, that tastes so good. And so I was just going to see if it's just me, and so I have two boys, one's 16 and one's 14. And I went to my 16-year-old, who is not wired like me at all. Like, he has a relationship with food which is to be envied. Like, he just does not care about it tasting so good. He doesn't have to have it. He puts things down. He truly eats to fuel his body. He probably hasn't had soda in like months.
Oh wow, that's awesome.
You know, and so I was like, I said, hey man, try this real quickly, and I put a little dab of that hot fudge on a piece of sugar cookie, and he tried it, and he just looks at me and he goes, it just tastes like chocolate, Dad. I'm like, okay. He was not impressed.
Interesting.
I went to my 14-year-old. I said, hey man, I want you to try something, and I put a little dab in there, and he took a bite of it, and it took like 2 seconds, and he yanks his head around at me like I just gave him crack or something. Like, oh my gosh, this is the best thing I've ever had. And he is wired like me. He's wired like me in a lot of ways. Not like his metabolism is not. The kid has got a metabolism that'll burn through anything. But in terms of everything else, genetically, looks like me, acts like me. We're both, his ADHD is galore, hence this rambling conversation I'm having right now. And it was just interesting to see the difference in how both of them responded to the exact same thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's fascinating to me.
I know.
So I don't have a question there.
Well, you did when you started. Why does the brain do this?
Why does the brain do that to us? That's my thought.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, it is. I think it's heartbreaking because food is required to live.
Yeah.
And then people develop a relationship with food that's terrifying, that they feel like it threatens their ability to live. And that's such a hard thing, right? I think that's where disorders around food and sex are kind of similar, right? We notice our treatment models really have some overlap when it comes to those two topics, because both of those processes are necessary and part of the human experience. And to be having this fear, terror, and yet compulsive taking over my life struggle with those two, absolutely necessary processes, it's just such a challenge, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And so I don't know if the question so much is why does the brain do that, but how does it do that?
Yeah.
Right?
Right. And I want to say this to anybody that's listening that battles with eating disorder or disordered eating. I know you can't, prevent anybody from saying anything to you, but please don't buy into the notion that it should just be easy. If you need, if you want to lose weight, if you want to get into shape and get a rock hard body or whatever, that just do it. And if you really wanted it, you do it. And that is such a strong misconception and a fundamental misunderstanding of food and biology and how this all works. Like, it's not.
Yeah. And I think that I don't like the word triggers, even though I use it all the time. But I think that is one of the most common triggers that most of my clients have, is when people tell them, well, it's easy. You just eat like this. You should be able to do this differently.
Right.
Yeah.
It's so judgmental and it's so limiting. It's such a shame-based
there's such a lack of self-awareness, because you could just flip that right around on them and pick out something that they have a hard time with and say, well, I don't have a hard time with that. You should just do it, you know, and it's like, it's not so easy.
Right.
You know, it does come easy for some people. It seemingly comes easy for my oldest boy, you know, but he's going to have his own stuff in other areas, you know, and so just don't fall prey to that thinking as much as you can, you know, because I don't know the reason for it. I have speculations, and I'm okay with sharing them, but I think that one, you know, food is such a big part of our culture. It's a big part of a lot of cultures. You know, I always talk about when it comes to like addictions and compulsive behavior, there are two types of compulsive behavior that our culture will support, will encourage you to do it, and they'll support you through it. So hardly anybody comes in specifically to talk about it until something's, you know, until it's with food, it's dangerous, right?
Right.
But one of them's work. Like,
Yeah.
I've had one client in 20 years come in and say, you know, I work too much and I need help. One, that's
Yeah.
it.
Right.
Nobody's coming in saying that. Now, eventually we get to that.
Yeah.
Right. That's
right.
what happened to you guys too, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But the other one's food. Like, and you know, the anorexia nervosa, bulimia nervosa. I would encourage anybody who's listening to this to, if you don't know the differences, what's really fascinating about those is there's some really stark psychological differences in
Yes.
what's happening
Right.
with those two behaviors. So go check that out. But I don't know, you know, if you can answer this, Rebel, because you do this more than I do. If people are regularly, if it's on their radar to go get help for disordered eating. You know, I think they go to the gym. They're like, I'm going to start, or they start doing these they start doing these maladaptive behaviors.
Right.
To tend to it.
See nutritionists, which
Right.
there's a difference between nutritionists and dietitians.
Yes.
Oh, I didn't know this. Sorry.
Oh, there is, yes.
I just thought dietitians just didn't like being called nutritionists.
Oh, you did?
I didn't know there is a difference.
Dietitians go to college and they become RDs,
Okay.
registered dietitians.
Gotcha.
Where nutritionists, I mean, I can go call myself a nutritionist if I'm handing out pills or...
It's like the difference between a therapist and a life coach.
Right. Essentially, yes.
So it's really just hard to verify credibility. Because there are some life coaches out there that are really good.
Yeah.
Right.
But anybody can call themselves a life coach.
Sure.
Right?
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
I gotcha. Okay. I really didn't know that. I just thought it was dietitians preferred to be referred to as dietitians and not nutritionists. So, okay.
Yeah.
Good. And I think it's important to mention too, and I'd like to hear your perspective on this too, Rebel, that, you know, eating disorders aren't about food in a
Right.
sense, right?
Right.
What's it about?
So, I mean, they're maladaptive coping mechanisms. They do definitely impact our relationship with food, but they are about so much more than that. I mean, it could be based on trauma. You know, they could be coping with depression. They could be coping with perfectionism and control. I mean, usually, yes, there's that underlying reason that they're having to cope maladaptively.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's too simple to say it's one thing, right? But I think that and I obviously don't treat this definitely primarily, but of course it's going to be a part of work, even in disordered eating, right? It's going to be a part of, excuse me, our work. But I definitely think it is a nutritious experience to explore that client's relationship with control and out of control, right? Really talking about that, because I think that's what a lot of people get when they sign up for an exercise program or a diet program, right? That's that's a reach out for control, for measurements, for containment. I can do this, and this is how I do it, right? And we tend to feel good, right, when we have some kind of structure, we have some kind of plan. And so I think that just like anything, you can start to kind of explore that theme around control.
Right.
Well, I want to talk about the how people can determine the level of care, and then we're going to kind of
Yeah.
close out with talking about some resources for everybody, just kind of give everybody a heads up. But in kind of transitioning into the levels of care, the first thing that kind of has to happen, and one thing I really believe that happens when people are ready for change is they experience some form of loss, or they're threatened with loss in some way.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about, I'm like, I wonder what, for Carrie and Rebel, have you guys had any experiences with food where you're like, you made a change? I know, like, my wife had that happen when she had a really severe medical thing happen. She came out of it with food allergy, a really unique food allergy that really impacted her, where she has no problem resisting certain foods because she remembers that pain. But kind of on a lesser, I guess, kind of more, not to make light of anybody's situation or anything like that, but just kind of a comical example for me is I remember. Did you guys ever eat so much food you ate yourself sick? Like you like gorged yourself. You're just like, ugh, I feel so horrible. Like, I don't mean like I felt horrible sleeping. I mean, like, at the dinner table, I'm miserable.
Yeah.
Sure. Mexican food. Right?
Yeah.
Everyone has gone to a Mexican
Yes,
restaurant.
yeah.
You push your chair
Or,
back and you're like,
Oh man, barbecue do it too though.
oh,
But
chip salsa, tortillas.
But this is common for me growing up. Like, I do that all the time growing up. And then there was a point in my adult life, in my 20s, that I'm married and I just ate myself sick. And I was like, why do I do that? And I have never done it since. Like, I 100%, I'm paying attention to body sensations. It's all good. I cannot get the 3
channels of
self-awareness out of my head that we did with Whitney on our show with Whitney. But I'm very aware of the body sensations that are happening to me while I'm eating, to know, like, I can't take another bite, which is interesting because it takes me back to this weird memory that I have of my dad. We were at the dinner table and we were eating my mom had made Little Smokies. This is our, Southwest Oklahoma meals that we had, and I loved them, and I'm sitting there, and my dad was a farmer, so he could come in at any point in time of the night, and we had all left the dinner table at that point, and so I probably was just sitting in the kitchen just because wanting to be with him, because I hadn't seen him all day, and he's eating dinner, and he leaves one Little Smoky on his plate. And I remember, like, thinking, like, oh my, I'm stressing out about this thing. I'm like, Dad, you have one left. Like, why don't you just eat it? He goes, I'm full. I'm like, but there's one. Like, and it's like not even.
It's a little
it's
Smoky.
So little. It's a half of a Little Smoky. I mean, not even a Little Smoky. And he didn't eat that last one, and it just like drove me nuts. But I get it now as an adult. I'm like, he knew. He's like,
full.
Done.
Yeah.
It's not worth it. At that point. So anyways, I don't know if you guys have had anything like that happen to you, but that was one that came to my mind.
Yeah. I mean, I think Mexican food is easier to do that. I don't like that feeling, though, of being that full.
Yeah.
And similarly with watching my children, my son is very, very uncomfortable being full. And he always has been. He does not like to feel very full. So even if he's very hungry, he will stop pretty quickly in, and he'll say very quickly in, I'm like, you barely swallowed all that. You really full? But I've just kind of come to the conclusion that discomfort of eating, not like sick, but even just being overly full, he's just very sensitive to it. He does not like it. So even when he's around other kids and boys his age, he always eats less than them, right? And he's just wired that way. He does not like that feeling.
This kind of reminds me, of, I don't think that my family was this way, but I remember hearing friends talk about this, talking about what leads to eating disorders, what leads to disordered eating. I mean, I remember hearing them say that their parents would tell them, you need to eat everything on that plate.
Yeah,
You
that's right.
know, or
Happy plates. Oh,
Yes,
that
yeah,
drives me
happy
nuts.
plates,
yeah.
or there are people in China who can't,
Yes,
who
that's the
can't
old,
eat,
yeah.
and so, you know, there's that guilt that was
Yeah.
then created within us.
Wow.
I had heard someone say
True.
once that just let you guys know that you overeating has helped no one in China.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I thought that was a
Well,
really
and I
good
do,
response.
I do
Yeah.
find that true for me because I hate waste. You guys laugh at me about my hate of waste,
Yes.
and it is in some very
So
bizarre,
funny.
silly ways.
Yeah.
But I don't like to put food on my plate if I don't think I'm going to eat it. I don't like to leave it. If now at a restaurant's different because restaurant portions
Right.
are not reasonable. But when I'm making my food, I know how much I'm going to
Yeah.
eat. So I'm pretty about what I put on there. I'm going to eat. And sometimes I have to say, "Hey, guess what, Carrie? If you're full before you finish this, you don't have to eat it." And I still have to kind of
Yeah.
tell myself that 'cause that's wasteful, right?
Oh,
So those
man,
messages.
we grew up in that era, didn't we?
I know.
Jeez.
I know these messages, right?
Yeah, but the key there though is knowing your own flavor of disordered eating, you know, and so
Right.
like if so, I do that like if. We grew up eating leftovers, like, and I mean, like leftovers, you know, like the leftovers were leftover type thing, you know, and so like when my wife, you know, she's like, you know, if when we first got married, she's like, if there's, you know, if it's more than 2 or 3 days old, it gets trashed. I'm like, what? So now I know, like, if there's leftovers in the fridge in 2 or 3 days, it's going in the trash. I got to eat it. You know, and I have to intentionally stop myself and go, you know, and like have a conversation. It's like, it's okay. Like, you're not helping yourself or anybody else by scarfing that down.
Sure.
Right.
You know, and I think that's one of the keys in learning to manage this is really understanding your own your relationship with food, your body, the body
What's your
sensation,
body?
all those channels that we talked about.
Yeah.
Emotional, body sensations, thought quality is what we talked about. But one thing that's interesting when you're talking about your son that and how he doesn't like to feel full. One thing I realized about myself is I don't like to feel the feeling of having lots of liquids in my body. So that to me is like, it's challenging. I have to make myself drink water. I have to be extremely intentional. Where again, my oldest son walks around with a water bottle attached to his hip, you know, and so I think sometimes, Rebel, I'd like to hear from you on this, that I'm wondering anyways, if sometimes we are getting the wrong signal that is contributing to this maladaptive pattern. Like, for example, sometimes people are thirsty and they think they're hungry.
Oh yeah,
Right.
I remember
Right.
learning that, and it blew my
Absolutely.
mind. Like, oh my goodness.
Yeah, or even you know, I feel empty, but it's not even food that I'm feeling
Yes, that's
empty
a good
from.
point.
It's, you know, it's some emotional need that's being unmet. But yes, I think absolutely. I think sometimes those
Yeah.
wires get crossed. You know, and for somebody who has a, you know, severe eating disorder, anorexia, probably more than anything, you know, they lose that hunger fullness cue as well. And so we have to teach that, and we have to teach some of those cues.
Yeah, to
Yeah.
get those kind of almost like reawakening, maybe
Right.
the ability to notice those
Yeah,
things.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So another example of that too is like, if somebody, if your stomach hurts, for example, and you're probably going to go down a line of questioning to try to determine why your stomach hurts. The first one probably being, did I eat anything?
Right.
You know, or is there, you know, a virus going around or
Right.
something? That might be the first one. And it's like, if no, you know, what did I eat today? Did I eat anything bad, or did I eat anything at all? Right. And then we do that with kids too. But what do we know is one of the most common reasons when a child comes to you and says their tummy hurts is anxiety. Right. And so, you know, is it possible that sometimes you're feeling anxiety and you think you need, that the problem is that you don't have enough food in your stomach, or that you have too much in your stomach?
Absolutely.
You know, and it's none of the above,
Right.
you know, but can we see how that can start being conditioned at a young age when a kid goes to their parent and they're going down that same thought process of, well, is there a virus? Well, did you eat anything bad today? And they're like, no, I haven't eaten at all today, or something like, or well, then maybe you should eat something, instead of thinking that it could also be
What if they're anxious?
anxiety or stress.
Sure.
Right?
Lonely.
Well, we could talk about this all day.
Yeah, we could. I know. But we're supposed to be wrapping up talking about the levels of care.
Levels
right?
of care, yeah. Like how are people to determine what they need? Like, do they, if they're realizing or they recognize that I have some disordered eating patterns, does that mean I just need to, just go right into therapy and work with someone like you, Rebel, or is there a way to determine that there are other places to start?
I think that could go in two different ways. I think that they could start seeing a therapist, because kind of what we discussed today, if there is a pattern of disordered eating, there's probably something else going along with it. Unfortunately, therapists are hard to find right now, right? So I have referred some people who've been referred to me for disordered eating, because I don't have any openings right now. I've referred them to dietitians to get started kind of with a dietitian and kind of let them evaluate what's going on.
Yeah.
Which is something you usually have to do anyways, right? Like, or you work real closely with dietitians anyways in your practice.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So there are other places to start, especially if you're like having to wait to get in to see somebody, like we know everybody's having to do right now.
Right.
And you came prepared with some resources. I asked you if there were books, podcasts, or websites. By the way, the OED website is really nice. The OEDA, the one I have linked attached to your name.
Thank you.
It's
I
got,
did not create it, though.
well, it's got a lot. They have like
information.
everybody in Oklahoma that treats eating disorders is at least I'm sure they've had to submit something.
Right. Everybody that
Yeah.
has given us their information.
Right.
Now, if there's somebody listening that would like to give OEDA their information, please do.
Yeah, there's a lot more
Good.
than I realized.
Good.
Yeah.
Well,
And
that's
those are
necessary.
also therapists, dietitians.
You're right. I noticed that too. Yeah.
There's some treatment centers in there as well.
Yes.
Okay.
Good.
Yeah. So, what do you got for us? Books, podcasts, other websites?
Well, I gave you my list. I don't remember it off the top of my head. But yes, I gave you a list of some books.
Hannah, you want to have that list right there on the yellow sticky
So-
notes?
These books, Health at Every Size by Linda Bacon, Body Respect by Linda Bacon, Embody.
Can I just point out the obvious there?
I know, right?
Her last name's
I know.
Bacon.
I know.
I mean, she's destined to write about
She is.
food.
Yeah,
I would be
yeah.
interested to know if she eats bacon.
I don't know.
I hope so.
Linda Bacon.
right?
I love it.
Yeah.
It's delicious.
Embody, learning to love your unique body. You know, one of the things we didn't talk much about was body image issues. But even in both of these body books, they talk about self-care. They talk about intuitive eating, intuitive self-care. So there's more than just, the eating aspect
Right.
of it.
Right. I would say that
Yeah.
what ends up being a bulk of the work is, for us anyways, is not so much about the eating as much as it is about the image and what you're thinking, feeling, and experiencing.
Right,
Yeah.
right, yeah. And then 8 Keys to Recovery from an Eating Disorder. Even though it has eating disorder in the name, it can be great for disordered eating as well. With that one, there is a book and a workbook that is great to go through with a therapist, but is also great to go through on your own.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah.
So
Well, good.
those are some of the books.
Right. And like I said, the OEDA not podcast, but the website is really nice. I don't know about the other state chapters, but does the national, what's it called? The
National Eating Disorder Association.
do you know the website off the top of your head? We'll find it.
I'm
We'll
not
link
sure
it.
what that one is.
Yeah.
But they've got a lot of great information
Yeah.
too. Also, Eating Recovery Center, they are a treatment center with several locations, but they have a lot of resources on their website. So I definitely encourage you to visit that one as well.
Yeah. So I'll make sure, as always, I will put the many links in the description of this video on YouTube. If you're listening to this on the podcast, they'll be in the show notes, so you'll have access to those. And like with all the episodes that we do, we really do try to put as many resources and I guess just resources available that we can think of, or that we mention in through the course of our discussion. We try to put those in the show notes and in the description, so you have those available to you. But it's been really good talking to you about this. I think it's
almost so big
needed.
it's hard to talk about it all.
Oh,
right?
wow.
You're like,
It
oh, I'd love to
is.
say this and then that, and then but then
I know. I kept thinking, I should have said this.
Right.
Yeah,
Oh, I got so
should
many
have brought that
great
up.
eating stories too. But I talked to you a lot about the absurdity of human functioning is one of the things I kind of on that existential philosophical kick I can get on, and talking about food culture is one of those things to me. It's just absurd. I'm like, why are we all sitting around a table chomping this fuel for our bodies into little bits letting our saliva break it down? We know how it's all going to come out, but yet we sit here and we do this and we make a thing of it.
and the same
And I'm
thing.
not saying we shouldn't.
Right, but
I'm
it's.
just saying,
I think it's even deeper than that, though. Right? If it's the life-giving force, then let's bring the people that we love together to enjoy it together. Right?
Right, yeah.
Man, you just made something I made ugly into something really beautiful.
Yeah.
I
Well,
like it.
I
Carrie
like.
has a way of doing that.
She does.
Good with
Yeah.
food, and I do make beautiful food. I don't always know if it tastes okay, but I can make some beautiful food.
Rebels, like I've been in, we set many meetings, Josh, and she makes a lot of your ugly into something beautiful.
Yeah,
I wasn't going to go there, but since
Josh
you did.
did.
That's
Josh
all right.
did.
That's okay.
Yeah, that's okay.
All right. Well, thank you everybody who watches this and supports this. Make sure you subscribe to our channel on YouTube. Give us a 5-star review on the podcast. And thanks again for doing this, Rebel.